Ilyasah Shabazz. Definitely a pleasure to have you here today.
And it's a pleasure to be here, Vlad.
Absolutely. Now, you have a book out that's been winning a lot of awards. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, it's called X, a Novel, and it just recently won the NAACP Image Award, the Coretta Scott King Honor Book Award, the Walter Dean Myers Library of Congress Award. It won a lot of awards, and so I'm pretty proud of that.
Okay, so tell me about the concept behind the book and why you wanted to write it.
So I wrote this book primarily to address my father's adolescence, because a lot of people thought that Malcolm X went to jail and just became who he was. And it doesn't really focus on his parents, his experiences as a child, and the influence of his father, the influence of his mother, the specific values they instilled in all of their children. They were two young activists. Father, president of the Milwaukee chapter, mother, the national recording secretary of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which in the 1930s commanded millions of followers worldwide. And so his parents played a pivotal role in that organization. And unfortunately, his father was killed, lynched by the KKK. And his mother, 7 years later, did not suffer a mental breakdown, as books purport, but that she was put in an institution and her family was torn apart. And Malcolm was sent further north and became the president of his class, all these great things. But when his favorite teacher, asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said, I want to be a lawyer. He didn't say, I want to be a fireman. He didn't say, I want to be a musician and nothing wrong with those careers, but he said, I want to be a lawyer because he saw his father defending people, speaking for people, helping people. He saw his father as a savior, a role model, much of what he became to be. And so when his teacher said, you can't be a lawyer, you are, the N-word, and, N-words must be carpenters and use their hands, not their minds. And that crushed young Malcolm's spirit. And so it speaks to the importance of these adults around us, right? Because it says to a young boy, your life doesn't matter. Black life doesn't matter. And so Malcolm then went on a slowly self-destructive path. And so I often say that when our young children are in pain and at a crossroads in their lives, they don't say, hey, let me get a great education, or hey, let me go and do something great in society. They're in pain. They usually resort to self-destructive choices, whether it's drinking, smoking, killing themselves slowly. And so I wrote this book so that it speaks to those young people and it lets them know about their individual power, the importance of self-love, your leadership abilities. And when Malcolm finally comes into himself, no longer running from his father, his mother, his identity, and his life responsibility, he becomes Malcolm X.
Sure. Now, before these incidents happened, Malcolm's uncles were actually killed by white men, and I believe one of them was actually lynched. Is that correct?
Well, there were a lot of people in his family. There are just a lot of black people who were lynched and killed, and so there's so many challenges that we continue to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Malcolm's parents' house was actually firebombed by the Ku Klux Klan at one point.
Oh yes, absolutely. His house was set on fire, but as an adult, my father and my mother's home was firebombed on Valentine's Day, and the firebomb was thrown into the nursery where his babies slept, and then 1 week later, he was politically assassinated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it just kind of helps to explain the kind of environment that sort of birthed a great leader like that. Just the kind of, just the amount of hate that he had to go through to kind of get to the point of of where he ended up being. I think it's pretty phenomenal.
Right, right. Yes, and it speaks to even, our times. And so I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City, and I tell my students all the time that it's not about black and white. It's about right and wrong. And it's about being able to recognize those injustices and having compassion and care to do something about it.
Sure. Now, you waited until college before you actually read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Why was that?
Well, I went to college when I was 15.
Oh,
And,
okay.
I went to in a summer program. I was 15. I turned 16 by the time September came along. We didn't, my mother focused on her husband and daddy. She didn't focus on the icon. So we knew about our father's humanity. We knew the things that he would approve of and the things that he would disapprove. And, we knew that he was compassionate, that he was loving, that he was humorous, that he was cool, that he was loving, that he was 6'4", and a little bit, and wore size 14 shoes, and that he was brilliant and read a lot of books and had this really fly hat.
Now, what did you think of the movie when you saw it? Did you feel like it was an accurate depiction of what actually happened?
I thought the movie was pretty good. I thought that Spike, most people don't know that I was in that movie, but I was a little too, well, it doesn't matter, but I had a little small part in that movie, and Spike is a friend of mine. I thought that Spike did a pretty, a creative job. He did an excellent job. I loved the burning flag into an X. I thought that was phenomenal. But, we're supposed to be this ADD nation, a nation of people who are ADD, right? Attention Deficiency Disorder. And most people that I know sat down for the whole 3 hours of that movie and watched it. So I think he did a pretty good job introducing the spirit, the soul of a man.
Yeah, I actually rewatched the movie before this interview just so I can get, reacquainted. I watched it when it first came out in the theaters.
Right.
And, I watched it in Oakland, and I remember just the reaction with the people cheering and booing and everything
Right.
else like that.
Crying.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, I think it was definitely a robbery how the movie didn't win any Oscars.
Right, right.
One of the significant things that happened in Malcolm X's history was, originally he was with the Nation of Islam, and he had a very high position in their organization. But then after a series of events, he ended up separating himself from the nation and making his pilgrimage to Mecca, which is something that you did as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So based on what you know, what really changed in terms of the mentality of Malcolm X after going through that?
A lot of people say that when my father went and made his pilgrimage, he came back a changed man. And, when the world first learned of Malcolm X, he was only in his 20s. When he made his Hajj, or closer to the time of his assassination, he was 39. And so, whoever we are at 20 is a little different than who we are at 30 and 40 and so forth. And so my father continually evolved, continually grew, continually transformed. As he learned, he shared. And he was always compassionate, always caring, always brilliant, a constant leader in everything that he did. So I think that, being denied your basic human rights for all of his life, and then going abroad to this ancient land, to the land of the Torah, the land of the Quran, the land of the Bible, and being amongst people who were, different shades, in their complexions, right? The human race, the one race, and being treated like a dignitary, experiencing all of this, this beautiful, these beautiful graces. I'm sure it had a profound effect on him. And yeah.
Well, I can tell you from my own personal experience, I'm a first-generation immigrant from Russia. I came here as a child. And I've always felt like there was a certain level of racial tension growing up between blacks and whites.
In Russia or here?
Here in America. I was only 5 years old when
Okay.
I came over, so I have very little, memory of where I was born. But growing up in America, I had just always assumed that this was just a natural thing between people who look different. And it wasn't until I actually went to Senegal and Africa, and I walked around, in Dakar and interacted with people. I realized that tension wasn't there between the different races. You know what I'm saying? Where I just assumed that this is just how it works in the whole world because I hadn't been out of the country before that. And it started to dawn on me that this is not a human thing that separates people, it's an American thing.
Ooh.
And then when you look at the history of America and what's happened with black people in America and what continued to happen over the years and is still happening, that this is something that's man-made, it's not natural. And it took me traveling out of the country to actually realize that. So it's something kind of similar to what you were describing your father went through.
Right, exactly. And, when I made my Hajj, I was grateful that my father had the opportunity to travel, that he had the opportunity to be respected by others, to embrace our humanity and to be able to come back and tell Americans what it's like in other parts of the world, that it's not a matter of black and white, it's a matter of right and wrong. And then gaining the support of different nations, to address this issue of violating one's human rights. And in the 60s, trying to find resolve to this ongoing injustice. And so today, I think it's extremely important that when our young people are protesting and when they are doing these demonstrations, that they have a goal at the end of that we're not just coming out and marching and singing, but that we're marching, we're singing, and we have an agenda that is going to be resolved at the end of all of that. That there has to be a goal at the end of all of that. And that's what my father had. My father had goals. And so I think that it's important to understand Malcolm and understand his sacrifice and all of the work that went into what he did. He read everything that you can imagine. He was traveling not for vacation. He was traveling in search of solutions to this human condition that would want to destroy its fellow man, fellow woman, fellow children just because of the melanin in their skin, So I think all of these things are extremely important, and it's important, again, to understand and recognize that it is not about black and white, it's about right and wrong. And when you have black people who stand up and say that black life matters, that they have to say that because systemically everything says that in this country and even abroad, it says that black life does not matter. If our educational curriculum is not including the truth about Malcolm X, the truth about W.B. Du Bois, the truth about Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, and the list goes on, the truth about the continent, about the scholars, the architects, of these civilizations, then it's saying that your life doesn't matter, we don't respect you, and we're going to give you 28 days to talk about whatever you want to talk about. That is black, but that is not worthy of being included in our educational curriculum throughout the year. So we have to say Black Life Matters. But in addition to that, we have to have a goal and an agenda with the Black Life Matters movement.
Gucci's absolutely the boogeyman of hip hop. Like, it's just certain individuals you just know that at any given moment it could go left.
Right.
Gucci's one of them. T.I.'s one of them. I told y'all that before. I don't know why y'all keep acting like T.I. ain't Gucci level crazy. Maybe
T.I. is Gucci level crazy.
Gucci might be T.I. level crazy.
You mean to tell me that if I walked up to your mother right in front of you and shot her in the face,
Yeah.
and then I left the country and you can't get to me, you wouldn't tell the police?
Hell no, where your mama stay at?